people in this country would be skeptical of brand new pharma products. And maybe they are, but they don't seem very skeptical of Ozempic, which is a diabetes drug that apparently, at least in the short term, can help people lose weight. And on one level, you can see why they're not skeptical. This is a very fat country. That's a huge problem. And a lot of people, a lot of us, wouldn't mind losing 20 pounds by taking a pill. So why shouldn't we? Well, we thought it'd be interesting to hear the other side, a side that you were not hearing on the question of Ozempic from someone who knows a lot about it. Callie Means is the founder of TrueMed. He once worked for pharma. He definitely does not now. And he joins us today in studio. Callie, thanks so much for coming on.
Pumped to be here, Tucker.
So you want to lose 20, and I'm speaking from experience, you want to lose 20 pounds, you don't really want to stop eating pizza. This seems like a super quick way to get healthier. Why wouldn't you take Ozempic? Why shouldn't I take Ozempic?
There's three big reasons Ozempic is very problematic, and I think really the Rosetta Stone to understanding what's gone wrong in healthcare and frankly pharma industry corruption. The first point I want to make is that if a fish tank is dirty, you clean the tank. You don't drug the fish. And in America right now...
So they won't notice.
In America right now, we've got a very dirty tank. 50% of teens and 80% of adults are overweight. And this has happened in just a generation. We didn't become systematically lazier in the past generation as Americans and frankly suicidal. Something has happened. And the core mistake of Ozempic is that obesity is not an Ozempic deficiency. Obesity is not the root cause of the problem. Obesity is one branch of the tree of underlying metabolic dysfunction that's ravaging our country. As we talked about, with over 50% of Americans having prediabetes now, 33% of young adults.
Wait, most Americans have prediabetes?
Oh, it's by some measures is up to 60%
of the whole country?
Of adults and 33% of young adults and teens. And you have a diabetes doctor, just a generation ago, wouldn't see one child in their entire careers with diabetes. Now, diabetes, which again is cellular dysfunction, is cellular disruption, totally caused by environmental factors and what we're eating. That's close to becoming, upwards of 50% of kids. It's 33% and growing radically. Teens, 25% have fatty liver disease, which is something you only used to see in elderly alcoholics. So there's a metabolic health crisis that's caused by decisions, right? The USDA, which is completely corrupt, the guidelines that set nutrition standards, 95% of the guideline committees paid for by food companies, they say that a 2-year-old, that 10% of their diet could be added sugar. We have more money from agriculture subsidies in America today go to cigarettes, go to tobacco than vegetables. 90% of subsidies go to highly processed food. We've propped this industry up. Food stamps, right, which 15% of Americans depend on for nutrition, 10% of all food stamps funding goes to soda. We're the only country in the world that allows that. So we have...
Goes to soda?
Goes to soda. So
the U.S. government pays people to drink soda?
The U.S. government, direct from the federal treasury, more than $10 billion per year go from the federal treasury to soda companies through the food stamp program. The number one item purchased with food stamps in America is addictive diabetes water. We prop that up with food stamps. As we talked about last time, I actually used to work and consult with Coke, and we paid the NAACP and other groups to say it was racist to take that away. We totally rigged the debate. So through a corrupt system, we actually subsidize soda. We do 10 of these things, right? We do 10 easily identifiable things that are causing us, frankly, to be poisoned. And instead of talking about the root cause, we're saying that a weekly injection that you have to take for your entire life that costs $20,000 per patient when 80% of American adults are overweight or obese, we're saying that is the answer for obesity. We have a dirty tank, and pharma has basically changed our consensus reality to say, when all these things are happening all at once due to environmental factors, our savior, you do the math on $20,000 per patient, 80% of American adults, we're talking, and this is clear on Wall Street, food stocks are going down, pharma stocks are going up because they're doing cartwheels on Wall Street. This is on track because of government funding, because we stand to put trillions of government funding into this drug to be the most successful drug in American history.
So what, wow, there's a lot there. But let me just get back to the individual decision to take or not to take this drug. So you're overweight, you have pre-diabetes, and your doctor says, what you would say, which is that's a very serious thing to have. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's not bad. It is bad. And this drug can cure it. Why wouldn't you do that?
It segues really well into the second issue, why Ozempic is so problematic. So on a societal level, I think anyone that agrees, if you're just looking at this issue, putting everybody and pumping everyone with Ozempic for their lives isn't the first thing you do to solve obesity. But even if it was perfect, even if it was perfect, but the problem is when you get to the individual level, this drug medically is a absolute disaster. Medically, it's a disaster. So all you need to know is that Novo Nordisk, the company that makes this drug, recently passed LVMH to become the most valuable company in Europe. So this company, most valuable company in Europe, they don't allow this drug for obesity in Europe. Almost all of Novo Nordisk's revenue is coming from taking advantage of Americans. This is not the first line of defense for obesity in any European country. It's not approved by the government regulators. They are saying on their stock calls that all of their growth is coming from the US. They're taking advantage of a broken US system in the United States. And when you dive into it, even people in the United States who are getting government funding, insurance funding for this drug don't have to pay for it. 30% of them go off the drug within 3 months. So even though they're fully being paid for it, and we're being told this is a lifetime drug, there's lawsuits coming, just reported in the past couple of days, on gastrointestinal issues and stomach paralysis. The drug itself essentially is stomach paralysis.
What is stomach paralysis?
The drug, what it does is essentially it sterilizes its stomach, paralyzes your stomach to make you not be able to process food correctly. And there's studies now saying that stomach paralysis, the really messing with your ability to digest food, actually stays after you go off the drug. So there's lawsuits now with people with severe gastrointestinal issues after coming off the drugs that's being pronounced, and that's coming out in lawsuits. Additionally, because of that, you're consistently seeing patients who go off the drugs gain the weight back. So that's almost, I think, universally accepted even by Novo Nordisk. When you go off the drug, you gain the weight back. But again, we're seeing most people that take the drug within the first year come off it because the gastrointestinal issues, the stomach issues are so pronounced. Additionally, the EU, again, where this company is based, just launched a probe into suicidal ideation caused by Ozempic. You can't even make this up. But the EU is doing a massive probe because there's so many reports of increased depression and increased suicide. Now, I was debating a Harvard doctor about 6 months ago, and I brought this up because it's kind of obvious. Your serotonin, what produces your contentment and happiness, 95% is made in the gut. And again, Ozempic essentially is gut dysfunction. So when you mess with the serotonin and mess with the gut, a lot of unexpected things happening. And very understandably, and really what's to be expected, is we're actually seeing reports of a mass increase in mental health disorders and even suicidal ideation from Ozempic. Kind of you just back up and ask, this miracle drug is too good to be true. It's really coming through.
Wait, so you're saying there could be a downside? It's not perfect?
30% of people. But I want to say this, and I'm a libertarian. I think people should be able to take Ozempic. I think most drugs should be legal, frankly. The problem is where the rubber really hits the road is there is an all-out assault to convince us that this is the appropriate drug. Again, this is the target market. This is why the stocks are popping and why Wall Street's going crazy. It's the biggest TAM, the biggest target market for any drug in American history. It's 80% of American adults. But it's being fast-tracked. You wouldn't believe this, but the American Academy of Pediatrics recently said that they recommend this as a first line of defense for teens. And the study basing that decision for the American Academy of Pediatrics to say that every obese or overweight teen, which is 50%, should take this drug, was a 68-week study. We had a 68-week study for a lifetime recommendation to 50% of teens in America to receive these injections.
So I guess nothing would surprise me coming from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which seems really like a vector for badness, given their performance during COVID. However, you just still have to wonder, how did that happen? That seems reckless. Like, how could a body like that, which has some residual moral authorities because of its name, how could they do that?
You are transitioning perfectly into the third point, which is that the reason Ozempic, I think, is such a important story in America today is because it's really, again, it's the Rosetta Stone of understanding corruption. Our institutions, particularly the healthcare industry, has completely let us down. And you just step back and think about it. Pharma is the largest spender on TV news ads. It's the largest spender. Novo Nordisk specifically is the largest spender on foundational obesity research. It's the largest spender on medical groups like the AAP. It's one of the largest funders of actual civil rights groups. So you actually can't even believe this, but Novo Nordisk is paying the NAACP to say that not supporting Ozempic is a civil rights issue.
So you're racist if you're against giving kids a diabetes drug?
It's on the NAACP website, and the NAACP is a registered lobbyist for Ozempic, saying that you are a racist because there's disproportionate issues with obesity in certain communities, that you're a racist for not supporting government funding for Ozempic. Of course.
And the NAACP takes money from the drug maker?
They're a registered lobbyist for the drug maker.
How can the NAACP be a registered lobbyist for anybody?
They have a lobbying organization. They have to declare who their lobbying clients are. And as reported in NPR very recently, they are registered as a lobbyist for Novo Nordisk. And on their website, they're saying it is an example of systemic racism to not support federal funding for Ozempic. So this is what I saw working for pharma. You just have to ask who people trust. People trust the medical groups. They trust civil rights groups. They trust the media. You have a situation where, additionally, Novo Nordisk, and this is reported, has given $30 million in direct bribes to obesity doctors. You would be hard-pressed to find a doctor who treats obesity in this country who has not received some kind of donation, not research grants, but direct consulting grants from Novo Nordisk.
Like just sending him cash?
Exactly. So
how can doctors take cash from drug makers?
Oh, this is what's done. The drug makers spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year in direct cash payments to doctors.
But you can't get the drug except with a script written by the doctor.
Yeah,
a prescription.
Who take direct consulting fees from.
How can that be legal?
This is what you watch things about the opioid crisis and how the opioid completes the same playbook. I actually, when I was working for pharma, the opioid crisis was in full effect, and there was a panel in 2012, and the panel was full of outside experts recommending guidance on opioids. The head of that panel was a man named Dr. Philip Pizzo, who was the dean of Stanford Med School at the time. He was a pain specialist. At the moment he was appointed to that panel, Stanford received a grant from Pfizer, who's one of the largest opioid makers, of $3 million for pain research. He appointed 90% of that panel, who are also conflicted, to receive direct research and personal consulting fees from opioid makers, and they relaxed opioid standards. This is exactly what's happening on obesity. You have Dr. Fatima Stanford, the head of obesity research at Harvard, paid tens of thousands of dollars by Novo Nordisk, just started a new...
Directly?
Direct. No, not to mention, of course, millions of dollars of research grants. She's been paid tens of thousands of dollars.
How can Harvard allow that?
There are no conflict of interest rules in medicine. Harvard is supporting her, and the NIH recently, it came out that 8,000 research grants went to university professors who also have a direct conflict of interest with the topic and the drug they're studying.
How can how can you be a physician, even a teaching physician, and do that? I mean, that's so obviously unethical.
It's so obvious. It's so omnipresent that it isn't discussed. I mean, you're saying this like it is obvious. It's manifestly obvious. You hear this, most Americans are outraged. This is like, you're swimming in water. You don't realize you're in water. This is how academia is. The food industry, if taking it to food, which is making us sick, spends 11 times more on foundational nutrition research than the NIH. Pharma is the lifeblood, right, of foundational scientific research in this country. And then you get to the NIH, of course, it's a revolving door between government and industry. And the vast majority of NIH grants go to pharma research. So the NIH is basically a grant-making organization, and this is just statistical, almost all going to research that has conflicts of interest with pharmaceutical drugs. The problem here is that every institution, all these institutions fundamentally make more money when we're sick. Ozempic doesn't cure obesity. It manages obesity for life, and that's a problem. Statins don't.
I'm sorry, I should have asked at the outset. You made a couple references to it, for life. Is that as advertised?
Oh, no, that's
so if I sign up for Ozempic tomorrow, the physician will tell me you got to take this forever.
Those are the instructions, yes. They admit that there's unknown metabolic problems if you go off. That's on the box. No, this is a lifetime injection. The key thing here, Tucker, and again, getting the corruption. right? You're paying off the doctors, you're paying off the medical groups. 50% of TV news funding. I mean, I think
I've seen it.
Yeah, and there's RFK's talked about this back in the day with Roger Ailes. When 50% of your bills, speaking the choir here, but 50% of your bills are paid by a certain interest, why didn't the news media have any curiosity during COVID why people were dying of COVID? Metabolically healthy people weren't dying of COVID. This is where the corruption and really where it all ties together.
I'm sorry, will you describe that in a little more detail?
We had probably the biggest event in American history since World War II, where we shut down the country,
yes,
where we really, I think, showed our weakness just physically and mentally as Americans. American COVID deaths were substantially higher than other countries. And research, it's not argued, has come out saying that the COVID was a foodborne illness. Dying of COVID was a foodborne illness. If you were metabolically healthy, if you had stable cholesterol, stable fasting glucose, weren't obese, you didn't die of COVID. COVID disproportionately, overwhelmingly, even among older people, affected people with comorbidities. And we're a lot sicker in America.
And the comorbidities were caused by eating bad food, mostly.
Comorbidities are obesity, heart disease, diabetes. Those are the main comorbidities. So if you did not have those, you were essentially not impacted by COVID and had an almost 0% chance of dying of COVID. So the media, though, right, who's heavily funded by pharmaceutical companies, didn't have any curiosity about that. Didn't have any curiosity. Maybe this is a 9/11 moment that we're not at our best as America, right? We are a sick, depressed, infertile population. Sperm count is down 50% in just the past generation. 25% of women now have PCOS, the leading cause of infertility. We are having trouble reproducing as a species. And these are all connected. And there was a moment to talk about this, but instead the media, the government institutions who are paid by pharma, pushed a pharmaceutical solution with trillions of dollars of airtime as the solution to our crisis. This was one of the greatest public policy mistakes in American history. After coming off of the worst public policy failure, I think one of the worst in American history with the COVID response on every level, keeping the bars open and shutting down the schools, to pushing an effective pharmaceutical solution instead of root cause solutions. We're being asked to trust pharma when 80% of the American people, their bodies are like rebelling against them with obesity, which are clearly a sign of underlying issues, where Ozempic and daily, weekly shots is not the root cause. This just on its face doesn't make sense. And then you trace the corruptions. Again, Ozempic is paying off everyone. They're one of the 5 largest funders, the company itself, one of the 5 largest funders of news ads, one of the top research funders of obesity research, largest funders to university on the obesity topic. And the thing I, kind of ram home here, Tucker, is you just have to look where the money is. So if you actually look at the analyst reports that are propping up these stocks, they're assuming an increase in obesity. So you talk about all the Novo Nordisk's largest company in Europe. They literally, where the money hits the road, where people are investing billions of dollars, they're assuming increased rates of obesity over the next 10 years in America. I was talking to a doctor at Harvard. They're underwriting a loan for a new obesity center where they can treat an issue of Ozempic. Those loans have projections for growth of obesity. They're not projecting that increased Ozempic is going to decrease obesity. The loans that are underpinning these medical centers, if you go to any city in the country, the biggest, most beautiful building is some kind of new pediatric, obesity center or cardiology center. The loans assume increased rates of conditions. So fundamentally, we have the largest industry in the country, healthcare, not asking. Imagine a leader saying, how do we reverse obesity? How do we cure obesity? They're not asking that. They're saying, how can we actually say obesity is not your fault? Oprah, who's involved with Weight Watchers, just apologized for preaching personal accountability over the past decades. She said, it's not personal accountability. We're supporting Ozempic. Obesity is becoming something.
Do you think Oprah got paid?
She's highly involved with Weight Watchers. Yeah, Weight Watchers has shifted from a personal accountability organization that it's been preaching for decades and is now a prescriber of Ozempic. They've totally changed because Ozempic is a better business model because you never go off of it.
This is insane. So maybe one of the reasons this is accepted people don't see it as totally crazy as I do. I don't take Advil, so all of it seems crazy to me. But the average, say, 65-year-old person in this country is on how many drugs?
About 7.
7.
Yeah.
And not just intermittently, but like over years.
Chronic. 90 plus percent of funding for medicine dollars is around chronic lifetime. So it's more recurring revenue.
So describe what that looks like the scale of it.
Yeah, I think again, we're so desensitized to this, we don't understand how crazy
That's
it is,
right.
how much of a failure it's been. Well, I'll give you an example. My mom. So my mom was 71 and went, for a checkup and was told by the doctor she was healthy. And she was actually at the time on 7 lifetime medications. So she was on, maybe a decade before, had high cholesterol, was prescribed a statin. And the message from the doctor was, no problem. Most, the majority almost of people your age are on a statin. No problem. That's a rite of passage. Then she had high fasting glucose. Again, that's basically prediabetes, which majority of people have. Metformin, one of the most prescribed drugs in the country, high blood pressure. So she has these comorbidities that are almost seen as like rites of passage. It's a rite of passage for a man over 40 to be on a statin. The majority are. So these were all kind of normal things. So as we've treated everything in silos, that's a lie. Heart disease, diabetes, in many ways depression, Alzheimer's, they're branches of the same tree. We've actually lied, saying those are different conditions, seeing 4 different doctors for 4 different treatments that don't even talk to each other. So we're managing the symptoms instead of seeing those symptoms as a gift and realizing that we have a root cause metabolic crisis. That's why the more statins we prescribe, the more heart disease goes up. The more metformin we prescribe, the more diabetes goes up. The more SSRIs we prescribe, which are now 25% of women.
The higher the suicide rate goes.
We're seeing skyrocket. So we're siloing everything. And literally.
So there's so many questions.
Yeah.
So 25% of women are on SSRIs?
We have a societal dynamic where 25% of women in the United States are on a medication. And I'm not just flatly anti-drug, but this is a societal dynamic, Tucker. We have 25% of women taking something that fundamentally numbs you out from reality. And we don't even blink an eye at that. And depression, mental health disorders, anxiety, suicide. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for young adults. SSRIs are
after drug OD.
Yeah, and which I think could be related. And SSRIs, you talk to any high schooler now and looking in it, it's the first line of defense. I mean, it is prescribed like candy when
to children.
Oh, yes.
SSRIs.
SSRI prescription rates are skyrocketing among teens. You talk to any high school counselor, anyone in any high school, this is the first line of defense when
I would never talk to a high school counselor under any circumstances.
Yeah, well, that's very smart. They're skyrocketing among kids, and there's actually a black box warning on SSRI's label actually saying that it increases suicidal ideation among children, and they're widely prescribed to children, not to mention the fact that 20% of high school seniors are on essentially methamphetamines, Adderall, which if you read the book Blitzed, actually traces the history. Adderall was developed by Nazi Germany as a tool for Nazi soldiers to be more aggressive, and now is prescribed widely along with SSRIs to kids.
One thing, I'm trying to keep track of everything you're saying, all of which is checkable, I assume, on the internet. Statin drugs are prescribed to the majority of American men over 40?
The last rate, I think 2019, the last study I said was 45%, and I think there's reports that now post-COVID it's close to 50%.
So what's the downside of statin drugs?
Oh, there's wild research coming out. I mean, the highest level, just even if the drugs don't have no side effects, heart disease isn't a statin deficiency. What statins, to me, at the most important level, represent that we have a moral hazard, right? Fundamentally, when you're prescribed that statin, you're told by the doctor that you're doing something. When you're prescribed the Ozempic, the doctor, Fatima Stanford on 60 Minutes, who's paid off doctor from Ozempic, said, throw willpower out the window. This is a brain disease. Food isn't the problem. It's a medical issue. Take Ozempic. Do not worry about what you're eating.
This is exactly what Purdue Pharma said about pain.
Yeah. So you have these messages. You have the statins. You're doing something. You now can eat what you want to eat. You wouldn't even believe this, but until 2018, and Dr. Robert Lustig, who's a hero of mine, has pointed this out, an endocrinologist at UCSF, the American Diabetes Association said that as long as you take your medications, you do not need to change your diet as a diabetic. So you literally have guidance from the American Heart Association, from the American Diabetes Association, now from the obesity industrial complex, saying that if you take these drugs, you're good. But that's a lie, because there's never been a drug in American history for a chronic condition that has lowered the rate of that chronic condition.
What's the cost of all that? Just diabetes?
Well, with diabetes, this is the root cause. Again, it's a misnomer to see this as an isolated condition. Almost 100% of people with Alzheimer's have prediabetes or diabetes. Diabetes is one of the...
Seriously?
Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes. The most highest indicator you can have for dementia or Alzheimer's is some kind of blood sugar dysregulation. If you have normal fasting glucose levels, your chance of having any type of dementia is very, very low. Dementia is highly tied. Again, I don't even like using the word diabetes. Our cells, diabetes is cellular dysregulation caused by our environment or food. Again, the majority of people in this country have some form of that happening inside their bodies because of our environment, and this is unprecedented. So diabetes is really the root cause. But if you just take diabetes, this is one of the biggest line items in the U.S. budget. We're spending, if you add up all the line items we're spending on healthcare just to manage diabetes, it's more than the defense budget.
The U.S. government spends more managing diabetes than it does on defense?
What is going, if you want to stack rank what would bring down the American Republic, it's not, marginal rates of military spending. It's not, what the marginal tax rate is. Our biggest line item in our budget, the biggest part of our economy is healthcare, and it's also the fastest growing industry. Healthcare is the largest and the fastest growing industry in the United States. The bulk of that spending is coming from government, and as it grows, it produces worse results. It is not slowing down. It's going to be 40% of the budget in about 15 years, and it's only growing. There's nothing stopping this trend. And as that's happening, we're becoming an infertile, depressed, sicker population at an almost exponential rate. We're going to cease to exist as a country because we let that happen. And you look at the budget and you look what's really going to destroy the budget in our country. Defense is a small part of it. It is healthcare costs. It is metabolic dysfunction.
And is diabetes the biggest?
Diabetes and prediabetes is the root of almost everything. You have very few people with heart disease, with many forms of cancer, with dementia, with all these. This is the lie that's being told. When my sister graduated Stanford Medical School, she had to choose between 42 specialties. She was a head and neck surgeon, and then the fellowship was going to be even a smaller part of the body, 1 millimeter of the. That's what doctors devote their lives to, like literally a millimeter. That's a lie. That's a lie. When she was cutting out sinus inflammation, right? She looked at a patient's report. They had 60 pages. They had prediabetes, they had depression, they had heart issues. She didn't speak to those doctors. And she was never trained how the inflammation that she's cutting someone's face open and taking out, not once at Stanford Med School was she trained or even brought up why that person has inflammation in the first place. That surgery, Medicaid will pay $20,000 for that, along with all the other comorbidities the patient has. We're training doctors, right? Medical schools, pharma companies, hospitals, doctors, nurses, insurance companies. They make money when people are sicker for longer periods of time. The way to do that is to silo conditions. That's why Ozempic is so important, because obesity is not a siloed condition. Obesity is a visible example that we are losing our way as Americans, and treating that in a silo is just medically not going to work, and it's happening because of corruption.
So, but it is, and I should just say I agree with everything.
Yeah.
But even if I disagreed, it doesn't matter. I would say Ozempic is a response to an actual problem. You conceded that. So if Ozempic isn't the answer, what is?
If you were an alien that came down to Earth and saw what's happening in America, and I want to make this clear, it's happening specifically in America. I mean, our obesity rate, diabetes rate, heart disease rate, it's multiples more than some European countries and Japan, countries like that. There's something unique happening with the environment in America. And if you came down, an alien that was smart, that kind of, had a veil of ignorance and looked around, and you saw 80% of Americans consuming such toxic things in their environment, that their bodies are literally cellular, is the visible result of cellular dysregulation. Obesity is literally the cells crying out for help and showing that they're dysregulated, which represents stuff happening invisibly in the body, such as all the chronic conditions we've talked about. If you look at that happening, highly related to mental health disorders, highly related to infertility, all connected, you would never say, let's keep everyone sick and give them marginal drugs. You would just never do that. We have been completely gaslighted by pharma. Elon, who I think is the most important American in the country, but has recently said these drugs are good. I think it's a little bit unlike him, because we're not analyzing the problem and assessing what the root cause solution is. I think we've changed our reality. We've changed our perception of kind of what reality is based on pharma, thinking that these marginal tools. And we've lost our way, right? The drug for every condition in a siloed state hasn't worked. We're all getting sicker. We've totally lost our way. Peter Attia pointed out that if you control for infectious diseases, and acute things that would kill you right away, life expectancy really hasn't grown in the past 100 years. With the almost 100% of life expectancy increase, which we all herald, is acute issues, things that would have killed you right away, right. Childhood mortality. If you actually chronic
polio, appendicitis, stuff,
all that stuff.
Yeah,
and so we actually have really lost our way. And if there's one moment to kind of, as a country, say, can we change course a little bit? It's this, because this is the biggest issue. This is 80% of Americans. It is going to, just do the math. In America, when drugs are prescribed widely, costs don't go down. You're not allowed to lower drug prices if they're prescribed widely. And the moment Ozempic is approved, which is an all-out battle to do for government funding, there's an incentive for every obesity doctor in the country to prescribe this to 80% of American adults and 50% of US teens. It's the government then can't tell the doctor what to prescribe. So you've got a $20,000 cost. This is $20,000. That price is not coming down. Do the math. 50 million, we have much more than 50 million obese people. 50 million is well over $1 trillion a year. This is why the stocks are going up, right? So the battle here, and this is my point to Elon and a lot of people, I want you to understand the battle is, what are we going to do societally about the metabolic health crisis?
And what should we do? Like, you're in charge. I know you said you're a libertarian, but let's just imagine you were a fascist and you could do whatever you wanted. What would you do?
It's not what I think the president can do numerous things tomorrow that will I think one of the biggest lies we're being told is this can't be turned around quickly. We did not have a metabolic health crisis a generation ago, and we can turn this around very quick. I don't think the American people are mass suicidal, frankly, which is what we're acting. We have an addiction crisis. I can give you a couple right now. The president tomorrow can tell the FDA that the U.S. can no longer be the only country in the world that allows pharma ads on TV news, which isn't to influence to consumers, it's to influence the news. Pharma buys off the news, and the FDA can issue an order tomorrow saying that that's no longer the case, that we can't have pharma spending on TV news. That is an executive decision. It can be issued tomorrow, and it would totally undercut the ability of the pharmaceutical industry to control our information. Food stamps, the ag bill.
So you think that pharma, I'm sorry, you're throwing for my aging pizza-addled brain, it's hard to keep up. But you're saying that pharma buys TV spots not to convince people to ask for specific drugs from their physicians, but to subvert the news business?
This is an open secret working for pharma.
Well, I never even thought of that.
This is an open secret. The kind of silly ads you see between the news breaks, the points of that is not, it's marginally to impact the customer, but the pharma's already got that. They've already bought off the doctors. They're good on that. No, this is an open secret. The news ad spending from pharma is a public relation lobbying tactic, essentially, to buy off the news. The news is they're not investigating pharma.
I've noticed.
The news has become basically a referee that you are a terrible anti-science Luddite for asking why, the shots that we require our kids to get, that fundamentally by their own advertising change the immune system of that child for life, why it's gone from 20 to 70. To even ask that question, the news referees that and calls you anti-science, when the two largest vaccine makers in the country are literally criminal enterprises. GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, in the past 5 years, has settled two of the largest criminal penalties in American corporate history for bribing doctors and creating misleading research. who are the two largest vaccine makers. So you literally have the media playing referee that you can't even ask a question. Parent is actually...
If you have a vaccine injury, and many people
right.
have, including some I know very well, even a profound vaccine injury, you're not allowed to complain about it.
No, you're anti-science.
Even if it can be shown, this is a vaccine injury.
The media plays referee because they're funded. But so in all levels, right?
Wow.
On all levels. And
I'm very dark, Callie means.
Well, I think it's hopefully empowering. I think this is why we have an opportunity here, Tucker. Like Ozempic, this is not some like new, like, it's kind of this funny thing, like, it's kind of vain, I can lose weight. This is the reason the stocks are going up is because this is going to be a lot of government money. This is going to be the highest funded drug from the US taxpayer in history. And we've got a society, when are we going to say, let's go another direction? Why are we trusting pharma now when they've been completely acting to garner no trust? We have to be basic here and incentivize better eating, better farming. Think about public policy with the $4 trillion we spend on healthcare. How can Americans be more active? These are basic things, but these can be done. And just two more quick ones. I mean, there's 20 of these, but you just have to go to the incentives. You were surprised that the majority of university researchers and NIH grants go to conflicted researchers?
Yeah, I was shocked.
Tomorrow, the president can say, we're not going to touch NIH funding, but we're not going to issue grants anymore to people with conflicts of interest. That would sound like a reasonable policy to 95% of the American people. I think that's unimpeachable, bipartisan policy.
Of course.
It will cause a conniption. The media the next day, with their talking points, would say it's the most anti-science.
NIH funding.
Exactly. So you could do that. You could change ag subsidies, which are just tens of billions of dollars to process food. You could put restrictions on university conflicts of interest, which are essentially R&D labs for pharma. And I think a key one, Tucker, and you go back to the American Academy of Pediatrics, this isn't just some like industry group. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Diabetes Association, and these medical groups have statutory authority to create the standard of care for how we practice medicine in the United States. They are funded majority by pharma. So the groups that are literally have statutory power to create the standard of care for diabetes, you just step back. Why aren't doctors in giving their patients prescriptions for food interventions if they have prediabetes? Why aren't they giving them and prescribing them and allowing them to use their medically, tax advantage dollars to exercise? If you actually follow the science, that would be the correct medical intervention to reverse that. But we're so gaslighted by this. It's just not even batting an eye that it's just pill, pill, pill. Americans follow incentives. It's what we're trying to do. TrueMed is a doctor actually can write a note for exercise and food. And that actually can open up medical tax advantage dollars and other insurance dollars. Doctors could do that, but the second you get someone off the chronic disease treadmill, that's not a profitable patient. There's nothing more profitable for the pharmaceutical industry than, frankly, a sick kid. You imagine a kid with prediabetes, inevitably they're obese, inevitably they have hypertension, inevitably they have heart issues. They're going to be, like my mom, much earlier on just a ton of drugs, being told on each of those drugs that you're not curing anything. These are conditions you need to manage for life. So we're getting people, there's a war to get kids on that bandwagon. We need to have the moral clarity, frankly, and communicate this like RFK is communicating it. There's something really resonating, and at the core of his message is that we've really lost our way. This is a big issue. This is corruption. It's corruption at the end of the day, which is destroying and profiting off, destroying our kids, profiting on us being sicker and addicted and depressed, quite frankly. This is a big issue we need to unwind. And frankly, President Trump has made some strong statements about this. I'd say watching the GOP debate is like watching a bizarre world. I mean, Rome is burning in a lot of ways. We have a corruption problem, and it sounds like they're at some cocktail party in 1988, GOP cocktail party. It's not about the marginal tax rate. It's not about the Medicare Part D, page 300. Our biggest industry, the healthcare industry, is profiting from us being sick. It's just that simple. And we need to unwind that, or we're going to destroy our human capital and destroy our budget.
If people have come to the end of this conversation and want to learn more, I never do this, but I think it's worth it with you for sure. How can they learn more about your views on this? How can they learn more about these issues? What would you recommend?
Well, as we talked about, this is my life's passion with my sister, who was a doctor who left the system. And I'll announce it right now. I've helped her write a book that's just put on Amazon today called Good Energy, Unwinding and Unpacking These Issues Using Her Experience in Medicine. We put our heart and soul into that book to really unwind these issues, which we think are the most important issues in the country. And then my company is TrueMed.com, and we help write food prescriptions. I mean, it's our company, but I want to say that I think it's the most important issue in the world. What we need to do is doctors need to follow the science. Doctors need to, when somebody has a metabolic condition, explain to them and incentivize them to practice better eating, to exercise. People listen to doctors. When we were told the food pyramid to eat carbs, we ate carbs. When we were told to take vaccines, we took vaccines. When we were told to stop smoking, smoking rates plummeted. We need every doctor and every medical leader, and frankly, I hope leaders like Elon who care about human capital and our potential, to say we need to unwind this and we need to get back to root causes in America and talk about food, talk about exercise, talk about sleep. You can transform your life. These policies would transform things. You can change your biomarkers in 3 months if you go on a functional medicine type program and really have curiosity about what you're eating, your behavior. What if we had that message from our medical leaders? So we're working on that with TrueMed, and I'm on Twitter, which I have mixed feelings about, but talking about this on my Twitter, Callie Means.
Callie Means, thank you for that.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, there are a lot of faraway places in this world, Namibia, for example, but Europe is not one of them. Europe is where your kids spent junior year abroad. Europe is an easy flight from the East Coast of the United States to pretty much anywhere on the continent. And you know this if you've been on vacation in Europe, as millions of Americans have. For the most part, they speak English in Europe. They've got Starbucks and Taco Bell and air conditioning and modern hospitals. It is not another world. So given how closely related the United States is to Europe and has always been, you would imagine our leaders would notice when Europe began to fall apart, especially when the signs were not subtle at all, and they weren't. This summer, Germans began clear-cutting ancient forests to heat their homes. In Poland, families queued up for hours to buy coal, just like they did 150 years ago. In the UK, the government projected that more than 10,000 Britons will freeze to death, will die this winter for lack of heating fuel. Freeze to death. In England. That is not supposed to happen in a first world country. So Europe is moving backward at high speed, and it's not clear where it'll end. So the question is, why is this happening? And the answer, for once, is a very simple one. The war in Ukraine. That's why it's happening. A huge percentage of Europe's energy came from Russia. Those imports have now been banned, supposedly to punish Vladimir Putin. What's the result of this punishment? Well, the Russian ruble is now far stronger than it was a year ago. The European economy, meanwhile, is collapsing. Europeans are much poorer than they were when the war in Ukraine started. So how is that a victory for Europe and the West and democracy? Well, that's a fair question. It's an obvious question. But no one in Washington appears to be asking that question. Instead, the Biden administration is doubling down on the self-destructive mistakes that are destroying the European Union. The White House banned Russian oil, natural gas, and coal. It was our moral duty. And then at the same time, the Biden administration crushed domestic oil production here by canceling oil and gas leases. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the Biden administration sold a piece of our strategic petroleum reserve, maybe this country's most important resource, to China. None of this hurt Putin in any way. All of it impoverishes the United States. So what could possibly be the justification for doing that? We've wondered. Anyone who's paying attention has had to have wondered that. Well, this week, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, of Bethesda, answered that question. Russia is an Orthodox Christian country with traditional social values. And for that reason, it must be destroyed, no matter what the cost to us. So this is not a conventional war. This is a jihad. Jamie Raskin said that out loud, but many in Washington agree with him, in both parties. They would like to see World War trans immediately. So what is a jihad going to mean for you? Well, the details are stunning. Thanks to the Biden administration's religious war in Ukraine, this country is about to run out of diesel fuel. According to data from the Energy Information Administration, by the Monday of Thanksgiving week, that's 25 days from now, there will be no more diesel. So what's going to happen then? Well, everything will stop. That means trucks and trains and barges all unable to move. Farm equipment will shut down. There will be no deliveries because there will be no trucks. There will be no diesel generators. And then inevitably our economy will crash because everything runs on diesel fuel. Not on solar panels, not on wind farms, on diesel fuel. Diesel is not a negotiable commodity. You have to have diesel. So what happens when we don't have it? Well, yesterday, Fox's Jackie Heinrich, apparently alone in the White House press corps, asked the White House spokesman, John Kirby, that very question. What's the plan here? We're running out of diesel. John Kirby, standing at the podium representing the White House, the President of the United States, the administration, the largest organization in human history, the executive branch of government, had no answer. But don't worry, he said. We will be exporting plenty of energy to Europe to help fight that progressive crusade in Ukraine. Watch.
What are we doing to increase the supply of diesel, given that the Energy Information Administration said as of October 14th, the U.S. only had about a 25-day supply? You have the Northeast and New York already rationing home heating oil. What are we doing to prepare for the winter and to ramp up supply of diesel?
I'll take the question on the diesel because I just don't have the data on that in front of me. So let me take that and we'll get back to you on that. But writ large, the president has been working very, very hard to make sure that we're that not only are we ready for fluctuations that could come, and of course the prices are going down, and we think that's important, but that we are also doing what we can to help our European friends and partners who are also going to be facing a long, cold winter. We have doubled our commitment. The commitment he made in March for natural gas exports to Europe, we've doubled that commitment in terms of actual, getting things over there, getting natural gas over there. And we are working with foreign suppliers of natural gas and oil to see if we can't help our European partners diversify their own storage and supplies.
So just pause and savor the irony here just for a moment, because now everything is irony. They've been telling you for decades, since Al Gore left the White House, that the single greatest threat to the world was warming. And because of their efforts to fight warming, you are in danger of freezing. And unlike warming, freezing actually kills people, a lot of people every year. And it will kill people in the West this year thanks to their efforts to fight warming. Okay. The second thing to notice is the White House spokesman's totally uninterested, blasé response to the most basic question anyone could ask, which is, what are we doing about the fact we're running out of diesel fuel? And he has no idea, and he's not embarrassed that he has no idea. The problem is, at this point, there may not be an answer, because there may not be a way to avoid a disaster. Diesel fuel is not just low in this country, it's low in every Western nation that has aligned itself with Ukraine. All these nations preparing for World War Trans are running out of diesel fuel. As New York Magazine has reported, the last time there was this little supply of diesel, there were about 3.5 billion fewer people on the planet. Well, that puts it in perspective. So the Biden administration responded, as you know, earlier this year to rising gas prices, which they feared above all because the midterms are coming in 2 weeks, by tapping the strategic petroleum reserves. But that will not work here. The Northeast Home Heating Oil Reserve contains 1 million barrels of diesel in case of emergencies. The problem is that demand is so high across the board that, according to the Washington Post, even if the Biden administration used every single barrel in that stockpile would be empty in less than 6 hours. And of course, it's not just diesel that's running out. Jet fuel is up about 23% in just the last month. Kerosene, which if you don't live in New York City, you know perfectly well is used to heat people's homes to keep them from dying, is now close to $7 a gallon. Who heats with kerosene, by the way? Poor people heat with kerosene. And they're the ones who can't get it. $7 a gallon. In New England, people are worried about freezing to death this winter. Here's a local Fox report.
West Hartford homeowner Sharona Resnick-Kravitz has been paying for oil to heat her home for more than 35 years.
I mean, this is New England. It gets cold here. We're cold.
Sharona is a widow living on a fixed income. She says before her husband passed away, they shared the bills. Now she is having to make sacrifices.
How are you preparing and trying to figure out what can you sacrifice at this point?
Food. I go to the grocery store and I'm very frugal about what I buy.
She tells me at $6 a gallon, buying oil has become a huge burden. The average home uses 800 gallons of oil per year. That's almost $5,000 at the current rate.
This shouldn't be happening in this of all countries. The United States has some of the deepest, by some measures, the deepest energy reserves on the planet. It's our main strength. Cheap energy is the reason this is a rich country. That's the reason. That's why we're exceptional, because we have cheap energy. And this country was energy independent just a few years ago. Now, if you want to fix the economy, you would make this country energy independent once again. You would bring back cheap energy. That will fix the economy quicker than anything else. In fact, it's the only thing that'll fix the economy. But the Biden administration, for whatever reason, has done the opposite, depleting our strategic petroleum reserve, for example. They just released another 15 million barrels the other day. Because they know that's running out, the White House is also begging foreign governments for help in the most humiliating possible way. Biden just went and begged the Saudis in secret for more oil. As the New York Times reported this week, Biden's top aides, quote, thought they had struck a secret deal to boost oil production through the end of the year. But then the Saudi royal family decided not to go along with it. They're not ramping up their oil production, they're doing the opposite. Saudi's oil minister is now telling the West to brace for energy shortages. Watch this.
It is my profound duty to make it clear to the world that losing emergency stock may become painful in the months to come.
So an energy shortage is not really a debate over whether some dude should be on the girls' swim team. This is adult stuff. Countries rise and fall on the basis of what energy costs. And when there's a real energy shortage, things fall apart. People die, economies collapse, poverty sets in, systemic poverty. Not just in the bad part of town, but in your part of town. So this is a real thing. The problem is the people running the government are children. They not only can't admit what they've done wrong, they don't even understand it. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre, the glass ceiling shattering spokeswoman at the White House, addressing the question yesterday.
I'm anxious to get your thoughts on this New York Times report that U.S. officials thought they had a deal with the Saudis before the president went to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia for his meeting with the Crown Prince. But they thought they had a deal on oil supplies and oil, price of oil, but that the Saudis backed out of that deal. What can you tell us about
So we have been very clear about how we believe parts of that report was mischaracterized, and there has been some changes that have been made to that report. Look, we've also been clear that our trip, that the president's trip to the Middle East, was not about oil.
But was there an understanding, Karine, with the Saudis that the Saudis then backed away from?
Again, the trip was not about oil.
This is embarrassing. She can't even conjugate the verb correctly. This is the spokesperson. It's a joke. She doesn't know what oil is, and she's lying. They're all like that. These people are not capable of running a country this big and this complex, and that's why it's falling apart. Joe Biden is blaming gas stations for high prices. How's Kamala Harris responding to all of this? Well, she's responding to the diesel shortage by telling you diesel's bad. Watch.
I have a particular fondness, I must tell you, for electric school buses. I love electric school buses. On a daily basis, 25 million children in our country every day go to school on those diesel-fueled school buses. And hundreds, thousands of school bus drivers are driving those buses, which are then these people, these children, these adults, are inhaling what is toxic air.
So the lady who never had children is lecturing you about children. The person who's never had a real job is lecturing you about energy policy. The woman who told you masks would stop COVID is telling you about diesel fumes and their effect on your body. This is a joke. The truth is these people are bumping right smack up against reality. And here's the reality. We have 25 days to avert economic catastrophe. Catastrophe is what will happen if we run out of diesel fuel. That's more important than prosecuting a jihad in Ukraine. It's more important than World War trans. Everything depends on this. And we've got 25 days to fix it. Josh Hawley represents the state of Missouri in the United States Senate, and he joins us tonight. Senator, thank you so much for coming on. This seems, so many things that we debate, I think, are important. Running out of diesel fuel would be at the very top of, I would say, the list of things that are important. I don't notice anyone paying attention to this.
You know, you would think, Tucker, but you would also think that it wouldn't make a lot of sense to shut down this nation's principal source, or one of its principal sources of wealth, of jobs. And I think what's really going on here with the Biden administration is this is a religion to them. The climate agenda is a religion to them. And the religion is that America is fundamentally bad, and that the American way of life, particularly American workers and middle-class families, that the way that they live is bad and that it needs to change. They don't like people driving around in cars. They don't like the suburbs. They don't like all the energy we use. Why? Because they don't like how we live. They want to change how we live. So the real targets of their war are the American people and the American middle class and working class. And I have to say, if that's their goal, it is succeeding, because they are crippling this country. And I think that's why you're going to see voters in a couple of weeks say no more.
I mean, Jamie Raskin, who is one of the most famous progressives in the House of Representatives, comes out and says in writing that we need to go to war with Russia because it's a Christian conservative country. Now, there are probably a lot, reasons not to like Putin, or people have different views on the invasion of Ukraine. But this guy is talking about a religious war. Should a member of Congress be talking like this, and should he be taken seriously? This seems like jihadi stuff and scary to me.
You know, you wouldn't want to take him seriously, except for the fact that this is the majority party in control of the entire United States government right now, both houses of Congress and the White House. But here's the thing, Tucker, that they won't quite say out loud, but is absolutely true, is that what the war they really are waging, the cultural war they're most interested in, is right here in the United States of America. Well, right. It's America's, let's be honest, Christian culture that they don't like. It's the way that we live. It's the way that working people and middle-class folks live. It's the values that we hold. They don't like any of those things, and they want to destroy the economic underpinnings of America's middle class and working class. That's what this is about. That's why Joe Biden says stuff like, this is a necessary transition. Transition to what? To their secular progressive utopia, I guess. Yeah. In the meantime, we all just have to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, well, I'm against all transitions. I'm just going to go on the record. Senator Hawley, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Michigan is a Democratic state, obviously, and it has a Democratic governor who, of course, was going to be reelected despite her appalling behavior during the COVID pandemic. And yet, she might not be reelected. New polls show that Tudor Dixon, the Republican, could be the next governor of Michigan. An amazing story. Tudor Dixon joins us next. Plus, we just obtained a very dramatic video from our friend Chuck Todd at NBC News. We're going to bring that to you just ahead. It dawned on us this morning, how long has it been since we checked in with our old friend Chuck Todd at NBC News? Quite a while. We saw this on the internet this morning. It's not new. We hadn't seen it before. It's worth seeing. Here's Chuck Todd.
Please get vaccinated. If you know someone who's not vaccinated, find a way to convince them to get vaccinated. Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. And for those of you spreading misinformation, shame on you. Shame on you. People are needlessly dying because of your misinformation. Think about it. I don't know how some of you sleep at night who are doing this for a living on television.
Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. Shame on you, you're killing people. Now that was last year, and of course now the data are, because it's plural as we scientists know, the data are in. It turns out old Chuck Todd was spreading disinformation, which probably killed a few people. Not that we're judging. We're merely offering Chuck Todd an opportunity to come on to this show and revise his assessment, maybe throw a few apologies around and be a decent person. So that invitation remains open. Chuck Todd, hope we see you soon. So it was just a few weeks ago in the very Democratic state of Michigan that the current governor, the incumbent Gretchen Whitmer, had a 17-point lead over her rival Tudor Dixon. That lead has evaporated. A new poll from Trafalgar shows this race tied, within the margin of error, even. How'd that happen in a Democratic state like Michigan? Well, partly because Tudor Dixon did a great job exposing the fact that Gretchen Whitmer is a liar and incompetent, and was particularly awful during the pandemic. She did it Tuesday during the debate between the two of them. Watch this.
We made quick decisions to save lives, and studies show we saved thousands. I am proud of that. But while I was getting death threats, saving lives during COVID, my opponent was sowing conspiracy theories. She was saying that kids couldn't get impacted, no need for masks. If she had been governor during COVID, thousands more people would have died.
Mrs. Dixon?
If that were at all true, why would I have gotten the vaccine myself? The governor is being dishonest once again, but that's what you do when you don't have policies to run on, when you killed more seniors than almost any other state, when you were told to stop the policy, but you kept it going, when you had such extreme unemployment fraud that you lost $8.5 billion worth of taxpayer money. She crushed our economy.
Saved lives? As we've chronicled pretty exhaustively on this show, of all governors, Gretchen Whitmer is the last person who should be saying that, because it's a lie. May the words burn in her mouth. Tudor Dixon is running against her for governor of Michigan and may win. She joins us tonight. Tudor Dixon, thanks so much for coming on. Congratulations on these numbers. Amazing. Why do you think that you are now tied with the Democratic governor in a Democratic state?
Thank you. I think I'm tied with her because our message is better. You heard her saying that she didn't do the things that she did. She came out and she said schools were locked down for 3 months in the state of Michigan. They were locked down for 2 years. In fact, universities were locked down for almost 2 years. And I think she lost a lot of those young people that said, wait a minute, we paid for school. We weren't even on campus. We exposed her lies, and we've exposed the fact that she's been terrible for the state. This is not 4 years. She's been in government for 20 years. She has said she's riding with Biden. We know that from her energy policy. She's crushed the energy system in the state of Michigan. She's also has a rise in crime that you would not believe. We are top 10 in crime in the nation. We are bottom 10 in education. There is nothing she can come back and say, I did this and it was great. She couldn't say it in the debate because there is nothing. She can't say it now. She's now coming out and trying to attack me as an extremist because I don't know, against kids being forced to get the vaccine. And guess what? I absolutely am. She says books aren't dangerous and refuses to answer to the parents in the state of Michigan who are saying, we want to go back to the basics of reading, writing, and math. And they want that because our test scores just came back and they're so horrendous. We went down twice as many points as any other state in the nation. Our kids are suffering from illiteracy, and she doesn't care. She still says, I'm the governor for students. We have a better message. We have a plan to get the kids back on track. We have a plan to bring business to the state. We have a plan to actually support the police instead of talking about supporting the spirit of defunding the police. And we can do it all with a lot less money than Gretchen Whitmer. Although her allies are coming into the state, they're just pouring money into her account. We could use your help. Go to TudorDixon.com because we need to go up against her. She's even bringing Barack Obama in, which means she's trying to get her base out.
Yeah. She's getting death threats, surrounded by taxpayer-funded bodyguards as people actually die in huge numbers throughout her state. I got death threats. Okay, she's the victim. Tudor Dixon, may you win. We're rooting for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is a Fox News alert. Elon Musk officially owns Twitter. He bought it not to make money, but to restore free speech to America. If he actually does that, this country will change forever. Immediately after the news came out, the CEO of Twitter, Parag Agrawal, who came to this country and immediately started destroying our most sacred freedom, and the CFO, Ned Siegel, are both gone. Yesterday, Musk walked in the door of Twitter with a sink. Let that sink in, he said. As of tonight, the old regime is officially out, and Elon Musk runs Twitter. We'll see what happens. It could be amazing. Really, in just a few years, Lori Lightfoot has almost single-handedly destroyed the city of Chicago. She's doing all she can to make it even worse. She's about to effectively shut down 2 all-black charter schools, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. The Urban Prep Academy campuses recorded 100% college acceptance rates for its seniors for 13 years. Oh, but they weren't controlled by teachers' unions, Lori Lightfoot's biggest backers, so now they are. really seems like she's doing all she can to destroy Chicago. Democrats really have done a lot to destroy the state of Illinois. They just passed the so-called Safety Act, which goes into effect next year, that will, among other things, eliminate cash bail entirely. Eliminate cash bail. As the rest of the country realizes what a terrible idea that is, Illinois is now doing it under its governor, J.B. Pritzker. So we wanted to talk to someone, excuse me, who's going to have to live with this law. Keith Pekow is the mayor of Orland Park, Illinois. He's now running for Congress. He joins us tonight. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for coming on. So since you actually run a municipality in the state of Illinois, tell us what this will mean for you and your town.
The Safety Act, and thank you for having me, Tucker. The Safety Act will be an absolute disaster for the town. Not only the elimination of cash bail, which we're already dealing with a lot of that with Kim Foxx's policies, and we've seen crime running rampant through the county, and we've been fairly successful in Orland Park with proactive policing policies to still keep it tamped down. But this is going to continue to happen, and even more so, trespassing, you won't be able to put a hand on someone. Basically, you can only ticket them, so they can't remove them from a property. And when that starts to happen and people realize that people can't police, I'm very worried about people taking the law into their own hands, and it's going to lead to anarchy.
So you can show up at someone's house or on someone's property and there's nothing that can be done, really?
According to the law, it says it's a shall issue a citation, which means they can't lay a hand on someone. They can't remove someone from the property if they've trespassed on your property. And if you do remove them, then you face potential civil lawsuits for the municipality or the police officer. So what could possibly go wrong with that type of a law?
So basically, it criminalizes reasonable behavior by law-abiding homeowners and the police and allows criminals to do whatever they want.
As I have said time and time again, what this law does is it prioritizes criminals over law-abiding citizens and the police. And as you know, I'm running for Congress, and my opponent has called anyone who opposes this a racist because that's all they can do. They can't come up with policies that actually work, that keep people safe. They want to continue to create a situation where people feel unsafe and really undermine the fabric of America and destroy American values.
Yeah, they're calling Abraham Lincoln a racist. Okay, so at this point, it's like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like, no one buys that anymore. We're over it. Keith Pekow, mayor, now running for Congress. Appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
So Elon Musk, as we just told you, now owns Twitter. Now, why is this important? Well, because everything we know about the world is filtered through social media. Social media companies now have more power than entire governments. That's why they were able to silence a sitting president. They control what you say. They also control more deeply what you think. So how pervasive is their control, and what does it mean for our democracy? Well, for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today, our 200th episode, by the way, we spoke to a psychologist called Richard Epstein who studies this. What does big tech mean for elections? That's what he studies. Here's part of the conversation.
The more I've learned about Google and to some extent other tech companies, the more outraged I have become, because these companies, they operate at two levels. At this level up here where we see them and where we interact with them, Gmail and Google Docs and Google Maps, and all we see is a bunch of free services, like they're a big, sweet, kind, generous librarian. Okay?
Nice description.
But down here, down below, that's not what they are at all. All of those services that we use, they're all surveillance platforms. Down here at the business side, this is a surveillance company that makes almost all of its money by tricking us into giving up personal information about ourselves 24 hours a day and our kids, and then monetizes it, sells it, aggressively. And they're making $150 billion a year now by doing this, and most people have no idea what that business model is. And they learned over the years that the more information they had about us, the more easily they could control us. And they have very, very strong values, which are like my values, actually. And more they have been using the information they have to control us, control our kids, indoctrinate our kids, and affect the outcome of elections.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Babylon Bee is one of the last English language satire sites left on the internet. And no, we're not counting the Daily Beast or the Atlantic Magazine, neither of which makes people laugh on purpose. The Babylon Bee, by contrast, is intentionally amusing and it succeeds, mostly because it is sharp and it's honest. This March, the site published a piece with the headline, "The Babylon Bee's Man of the Year is Rachel Levine." The article was funny because it pointed out that Rachel Levine is himself pretty funny. Here you have a man dressed up like a woman in makeup and purple glasses, wearing some kind of admiral's uniform, pretending to be the Assistant Secretary of Health when he looks like a candidate for an imminent heart attack himself. So the whole outfit is a riot. It's like a Halloween costume some clever drunk college student dreamed up. This year I'm going as an obese transvestite health admiral. You'd laugh if you saw him at a party. But the Biden administration can't allow you to laugh at Rachel Levine or at Karine Jean-Pierre or Kamala Harris or any of the other transparently absurd figures that pretending are running our country. Or for that matter, at Biden himself, who somehow they tell you got, quote, 81 million votes despite being senile and rarely going outside. It's all pretty funny when you think about it, but you can't laugh. And you can't laugh because humor is the most subversive thing. Once you start noticing the pure, hilarious ridiculousness of the people in charge, you may be much less likely to obey them. So it's absolutely vital that somebody wipe that smirk off your face by force if necessary. So Twitter immediately banned the Babylon Bee from its site for the crime of making fun of Rachel Levine. So you've heard that story. You've heard other stories like it. But here's what's interesting about this one. Elon Musk, wherever he was at the time, noticed this happening. And he was appalled. He wasn't appalled because he's an ideological conservative. Musk is the richest man in the world, and he didn't get that way by being a right-wing political activist. He's a business guy. To the extent Musk has politics, they seem to be traditional civil liberties-oriented liberal. But banning a comedy site for mocking someone in power? That seemed totalitarian to Elon Musk. So Musk called the head of the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, and told him that he, quote, might need to buy Twitter. And he wasn't kidding. Yesterday, after months of legal drama, Musk did that. "The bird is freed," he tweeted. Then he fired several of the company's top executives, including its CEO, Parag Agrawal. Within hours, he pledged to let people laugh online if they wanted, to let people who've been excluded from our public conversation speak, lifting the bans on the banned commentators on Twitter. That would include presumably Donald Trump, the former president, Project Veritas, a group of journalists, Alex Jones, and many thousands of others. Then Musk promised to make Twitter's algorithm transparent. What is Twitter's algorithm exactly? Well, we don't have any real idea because no one's seen it. We will now. Twitter will no longer be a publicly held company. It'll be a privately held company. And Musk has said he will show us exactly how it works. Apparently, the algorithm has effectively existed to censor conservatives on the basis of their political views. So now, in one day, people who could not speak will be allowed to speak. The playing field will be transparent, which is a prerequisite for fairness. And if you want to laugh on social media, you can. It seems like a big day. This seems like good news. And if your job was to defend freedom of the press, and it is the job of journalists to defend freedom of the press because they rely on it, you'd think you'd be pretty excited about this. Oh, but they're not excited. Instead, journalists are panicked by this development. Watch.
I think he's a jerk. I think that he's cavalier. I think there's something dangerous when the richest guy in the world controls one of the most important political social platforms in the world. I think just as a guy who ran a business, you come in business and to fire the people before you even sit down with them just shows a cavalier recklessness. He reminds me of a Bond villain. As I said, when the richest guy in the world buys a social media platform, it's just not a good equation. I think he's a dangerous fella.
It's scary when rich people own media companies, says Donnie Deutsch, who inherited a media company from his own rich father. But he doesn't mean it. There's no principle here. No one at MSNBC means it. How do you know that? Because they're not complaining about, say, MSNBC's corporate owners, its billionaire owners at Comcast. They're not upset about the fact that Jeff Bezos, probably the second richest man in the world, owns the hometown newspaper of the government, the Washington Post. The Washington Post, owned by another billionaire, just published a tweet telling users how they can crush Twitter now that Elon Musk owns it. Quote, if you do only one thing, the Post wrote, lock down your ad settings on Twitter. Starve them out. The Washington Post reporters are also panicked that free speech might be back on Twitter. Taylor Lorenz, one of their most famous and thoroughly ridiculous reporters, had a particularly rough night. Quote, it's like the gates of hell opened on the site tonight, she wrote. The gates of hell. People in the media, you may have noticed, spend their entire lives online. No, the gates of hell open when we run out of diesel fuel and the airlines don't work and people freeze to death. The gates of hell don't open when people get to say what they want on social media. Sorry, get some perspective, honey. But none of them have perspective. It is sad, responded Frank Shaw, who works at the head of communications at Microsoft. Lorenz was upset because she makes her living by defaming people and then harassing them personally. But until last night, Twitter protected her and many journalists like her from any criticism whatsoever. Here was Vijaya Gadde, who is the chief censor at Twitter, the head lawyer, explaining why Twitter bans anyone who mocks journalists, because it's dangerous to mock journalists. Watch.
We were trying to understand the context of what was going on and take action on them. Because again, I don't know, Joe, if you've ever been the target of a dogpiling event on Twitter, but it is not particularly fun when thousands of people or hundreds of people are tweeting at you and saying things. And that's can be viewed as a form of harassment. It's not about the individual tweet. It is about the volume of things that are being directed at you.
I understand.
And so in that particular case, we made the judgment call, and it is a judgment call, to take down the tweets that were responding directly to these journalists that were saying, learn to code, even if they didn't have a wish of harm specifically attached to them because of what we viewed as coordinated attempt to harass them.
See how this works? So when you're a journalist, you can destroy people's lives in this country on behalf of a political party. You can totally crush them, get them fired from their jobs, attack them to the point they literally lose custody of their children, which is happening now, by the way. You can do whatever you want if you're a journalist, but if anyone criticizes you, they have to be shut down because their criticism is violence. In this case, Twitter objected to the phrase learn to code. Now, that's a phrase specifically used to mock journalists because that's what journalists told coal miners to do when they lost their jobs. Learn to code. It's not a threat in any way. It's not violence. It's a joke. But until last night, you couldn't say it on Twitter. Of course, you could aim it downward. You could still tell coal miners to learn to code, but you couldn't tell people with power to learn to code. That's the point. When you eliminate free speech, who do you help? The people in charge. Only the powerful benefit from censorship. The editor of the Daily Caller was banned for telling the Daily Show to learn to code. So the propagandists had protection from Twitter. That's the point. And they've lost it. And blogs like The Verge are very upset. The Verge just published a profanity-laced screed that included this amazing line, quote, most people do not want to participate in horrible, unmoderated internet spaces. Also, everyone crying about free speech conveniently ignores that the biggest threat to free speech in America is the effing government. Okay, well, that's true, but it's also a lie by omission. Because, in fact, Twitter was acting on behalf of the government. That's the point. And we know that thanks to lawsuits filed by Alex Berenson and others. We know for a fact that Twitter censored political views at the behest of the White House and also at the behest of Pfizer. So the biggest company in the world, the biggest government in the world, get together and tell less powerful people they can't talk. And that's what the media are defending right now. So obviously they don't understand the concept of freedom of speech or why it's important or why Elon Musk bought Twitter. Joe Cirincione, a, quote, NatSec expert, member on the thoroughly discredited Council on Foreign Relations, wrote this last night, for example. Quote, I now approach every tweet as if it could be my last. Ooh, the self-dramatization of these people. They're such drama queens. Democratic Party lawyer Mark Elias was hysterical as well. Quote, I am here until he kicks me off. The thing is, Mark Elias isn't going to be kicked off Twitter now. We don't want him to be, by the way. We think everyone should be able to speak, period, because that's the basis of a free country. When you don't have that, you have totalitarianism, and only people who are benefiting from it support it. The whole point of the transaction is to make certain that everyone can talk. That's why Elon Musk did this. The point is to stop censoring all people, period. As the popular account Comfortably Smug put it, quote, we're celebrating because we're free to say what we want. That's what they took from us, and that's why they're terrified now. Exactly. So the people who've always been able to say whatever they want are upset, not because their right to speech is under threat, because you now have the right to speech. And they hate that, because now it's more of a fair fight. Restoring free speech is the main reason that Elon Musk fired Parag Agrawal. That would be the head of Twitter, the loathsome head of Twitter, who went on the record in 2020 saying his goal was to block people from saying what they believe to be true. Watch.
Our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation. And our moves are reflective of things that we believe lead to a healthier public conversation. The kinds of things that we do to work about this is to focus less on thinking about free speech, but thinking about how the times have changed. One of the changes today that we see is speech is easy on the internet. Most people can speak. Where our role is particularly emphasized is who can be heard.
So free speech isn't just a prerequisite for freedom, of course. It's not simply the first right guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. It's our civic religion. It's what America is. Without free speech, it's not America, period. So here you have a guy who comes to America, clearly a smart guy, does very well here, good for him, made like $42 million last year, great. And within a few years of getting here, decides to overturn our civic religion, and nobody says anything about it. Be gone. No. Elon Musk, also an immigrant to this country, by the way, comes here because he understands that freedom of speech is the whole reason you would want to live here in the first place. So the thing about Twitter before yesterday was that it was censoring people before you even knew you were censored. This is called shadow banning, using algorithms to suppress information, like the New York Post's accurate reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. They did a lot of that, remember?
One of the things I'm most excited about in our efforts is to switch to proactive enforcement. I think that for too long we relied on people reporting things to us, and I'm sorry about your experience and the reports that you get. I can't address those specific ones, but I do think enabling Twitter to be more proactive and actually identify this content to the extent that we can is going to make a big difference for people so that we can take action on this content before it even gets seen.
Yeah. So we can censor you before you even know you've been censored. And we're so confident in our total power over you that we can brag about it on TV. Now, that woman and her boss and a lot of other people at Twitter, the enemies of free expression, the enemies of freedom itself, they're all gone. Walking down the road, talking their lunchboxes. This is a huge deal. It's hard to overstate how transformative this could be. The activist left believed it owned Twitter and the public conversation in this country more broadly. Why do they think that? Because for many years they have owned it. They had a monopoly, and that monopoly has been broken. Once everyone can talk, rich or powerful, poor or powerless, doesn't matter. When everyone can talk, nothing will ever be the same. And the Democratic Party will be forced to defend its positions on their merits. Democrats pulled a sitting president off Twitter. Now, apparently, he's running again. So how could you possibly defend censoring that candidate, Donald Trump? If you support democracy, are you really going to argue that a presidential candidate can't talk? They're going to have to argue that. They're going to have to say that in public. What's that conversation going to look like? The Biden administration is in trouble because of this. Everything depends for them on censorship. Everything. They're going to do everything they can to shut Twitter down again. And they're going to do their best to destroy its new owner. And Elon Musk must know that. He's doing it anyway. And that's the definition of bravery. People assume always that billionaires can afford to be bold. You can do whatever you want. You're rich. But the opposite is true, actually. Look around. How many brave billionaires are there? Not many. Why? Because the more you have to lose. There's no such thing as FU money. There's only FU poverty. And yet the richest man in the world is risking it all to save free speech. Whatever you think of Elon Musk and however this ends, that's a remarkable thing to watch. Harmeet Dillon is the CEO and founder of the Center for American Liberty, and she joins us tonight. Harmeet, thanks so much for coming on. You've devoted your entire life to defending free speech in the courts, and bless you for that. You're one of the very few who still does it. Does this seem like a big deal to you?
Well, it's a huge deal, Tucker, and I'm very excited. Now, Elon Musk, like you said, is taking a big risk by doing this. He's putting a target on his back. He's already done that. And, you know, my perspective has been that Twitter is so important to the public discourse here. I've actually sued Twitter on 2 occasions for 2 people with radically different political views, but both of whom were censored. Meghan Murphy was censored for stating truths about transgender people coming into women's bathrooms and spaces and creating threats. And Rogan O'Hanley was censored by our California government using a Biden vendor to take down his accurate speech questioning certain aspects of the 2020 election. Many, many of our other clients have been censored. You mentioned Project Veritas. Tulsi Gabbard is shadow banned, so many of us. And so I love the First Amendment and happy to see that the new owner of Twitter does as well. And I think that some of the things that he needs to do to immediately restore confidence in the value of this platform is, like he said, to open up the algorithms, to stop the shadow banning, to really open up and publish the records of all attempts by governments, by private corporations, by politicians to ask for censorship. We should all know what happened, and transparency is the first step to resolving the public trust in this very important platform. So even though I'm suing, I would love to see these improvements be made. And all of the noises he's making so far, yesterday's terminations of the most egregious anti-speech executives at Twitter, is a major first step. And now I hope Elon Musk hires the right people. People are policy. It's going to be very important for him to make sure that the new leaders of Twitter discard all of these bad old policies. And then I think, it is a absolutely open horizon for free speech on the internet now.
And tell us exactly when and how government colluded with social media platforms to squelch political speech. You make such a smart point in saying that. I wish I'd thought of that myself, but I hope that they will do that. We have an absolute right to know. Because that is, just really quickly, that is like a clear violation of the First Amendment, is it not?
I believe so, and that's what our lawsuits have been alleging. So far, courts haven't gone there. They need to. So the lawsuits are ongoing. I hope we can, move past them and speak freely.
Amen. Thank you for all you've done on behalf of Speaking Freely. Harmeet Dillon, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, in November, in a few weeks, voters in Michigan will get a chance to vote up or down on something called Proposal 3. It's an amendment. Democrats like Gretchen Whitmer are pitching this as a pro-choice law because it guarantees, quote, reproductive freedom to, quote, every individual. So it's a response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But that's not actually what it is. It's not just about abortion. Proposal 3 redefines reproductive freedom for every individual to include chemical and physical castration of children, gender ideology. The Federalist Margot Cleveland reports the amendment would give girls the constitutional right to be sterilized by undergoing hysterectomies without their parents' knowledge or consent. The right to sexually mutilate children. John Gibbs is running for Congress from the state of Michigan. He joins us tonight to assess. Mr. Gibbs, thank you so much for coming on. Do you think that most voters in Michigan understand what this is?
I think that most voters actually do not understand what this is. I think the number that do understand it is increasing because the great pro-life groups throughout the state are doing great work to get the word out. I'm getting the word out on the campaign trail, what it's all about, because my opponent aggressively supports this. But I think most voters don't. We probably will get them by Election Day. It looks good. But right now, a lot of people simply look at it and it says freedom and rights. And a lot of people like, quote unquote, freedom and rights without even knowing the background behind it. So they're going to go ahead and say yes. So a lot of people don't yet, but we're going to change that.
I think that's really smart. Why is it so important for Democrats to sexually mutilate children? Why don't they leave children alone? Why is it always the kids they're focused on?
Because I think if you look at what their plans are, the parents are a barrier to controlling society. If they can get directly to the kids at the schools and remove the parents from the equation, it's much easier for them to control the development of children, their education, their ideology, et cetera. And that's what this Prop 3 does, is it removes parental consent, Tucker, as you said, for both sterilization as well as gender change operations, as they call it. And so you wouldn't even have to have a parental notification for those. It's a really, really serious issue. So, yeah, they're trying to get the parents out of the way so they can have easier access and control over the kids.
Why would parents ever, even people who define themselves as pro-choice, why would they ever put up with politicians stealing their authority over their own children?
You know, we actually see some progress in this area. You know, when you talk to people on the streets and you say, are you supporting Prop 3? They might say yes. But then if you say, did you know it allows your children to receive these kind of procedures without even having any consent from you whatsoever? Do you think that's a good thing? And almost everybody that answers that says no. The number of people that are learning about that every day is increasing, so that's something to be optimistic about. But most parents, I think, actually don't support that. As long as we can make them understand that's in the proposal in Prop 3 here, I think we're going to be in very good shape.
I hope so, too, and I hope that your campaign is in good shape. You've run a great campaign. John Gibbs, we're honored to have you on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker. Appreciate it.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We've been watching this story all weekend with growing bewilderment. Last Friday morning, as you know, around 2 a.m., police arrived at the home of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. It's in the Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Inside the home, they found Pelosi's 82-year-old husband, Paul, and another man, 40 years younger, called David DePappy. Nancy Pelosi was out of town at the time. In full view of the police, DePappy hit Paul Pelosi in the head 2 times with a hammer. Both Pelosi and DePappy were then taken immediately to a local hospital, Pelosi for his head injuries and DePappy for reasons that are still not clear. DePappy was later charged in federal court with assault and attempted kidnapping. At this point, that's what we can say for certain. David DePappy assaulted Paul Pelosi with a hammer. Apparently, DePappy has admitted that in police custody. But beyond those facts, there is much in this story that remains muddy. How, for example, did DePappy get inside the Pelosi's home? That's the first question. Last year, ABC News reported what you already guessed, which is that Pelosi has round-the-clock protection at her houses. Quote, she has her own security. She has the Capitol Police. They fly all the way out here from Washington, D.C. with her. And yet, in this case, San Francisco DA Brooke Jenkins says that there was no security present at the Pelosi home on Friday night. And that's pretty strange because, according to multiple accounts, even when Pelosi isn't at home, her houses are well guarded. Again, as you would expect. Our friend Harmeet Dillon told us that when her firm recently tried to serve a lawsuit against Paul Pelosi at various properties he owns, all of them were guarded by, quote, multiple law enforcement officers on the perimeter. So how did DePappy get past security that apparently wasn't there? And why wasn't it there, if in fact it wasn't? We know he got inside. And once he was inside, what exactly happened next? Well, accounts of that are changing. At the first press conference on Friday, San Francisco police suggested there was a third person in the home when police arrived. And Politico dutifully reported that. Quote, officers arrived at the house, knocked on the front door, and were led inside by an unknown person. In other words, by a person who was not David DePappy or Paul Pelosi. Now, Politico never formally corrected this claim. Instead, just 2 days later, Politico, the same publication, attacked anyone who repeated its own reporting as a crazed conspiracy monger. Quote, pro-Trump commentators weighed in online to raise questions about the investigation based on unfounded and false claims. Among those baseless claims, that a third person answered the door when police arrived at the Pelosi home. Okay, 3 separate adjectives knocking down that idea. But the question remains, was there a third person at the home? We don't know, but it's not crazy to assume there was. Here's how today's charging documents describe the scene inside the house. Quote, when the door was opened, Pelosi and DePappy were both holding a hammer with one hand, and DePappy had his other hand holding onto Pelosi's forearm. Pelosi greeted the officers. The officers asked them what was going on. DePappy responded everything was good. So it's an awful scene in some ways, but here's the critical clause. When the door was opened. Well, opened by whom? Common sense suggests it probably couldn't have been Pelosi or DePappy who opened it. They were locked in a life or death drama, a struggle over a hammer. The documents filed today assert that Paul Pelosi had never seen David DePappy before. Yet in Pelosi's 911 call, he knew DePappy's first name and apparently referred to him as a friend. Here's the audio. This is from a dispatcher relaying Paul Pelosi's call.
RP stated that there's a male in the home and that he's going to wait for his wife. RP stated that he doesn't know who the male is, but he advised that his name is David and that he is a friend.
So what does that mean exactly? Well, again, we don't know and we can't know. We do know that anyone who's ever met Paul Pelosi can tell you he is an awfully nice man. He's warm and he's friendly, and he certainly didn't deserve to be hit in the head with a hammer. It's horrifying that he was. But as long as this is a news story with public policy implications, and unfortunately that's what it's become, it is fair to ask the obvious questions as you would about any other violent crime that occurs in America, and especially this one, since so many facts, basic facts, seem to be in dispute. Local KTVU investigative reporter Evan Cernovsky, for example, initially reported that DePappy was, quote, found in underwear when police arrived. Today, Cernovsky made a specific point of retracting that claim, quote, I'm now told by other sources that DePappy was not dressed only in his underwear. Well, okay, fair enough. We'd be satisfied with either explanation, not really our business. But you can't blame, and this is the point, you can't blame people watching all of this at home for thinking that maybe there's something weird going on here. Parts of the official account don't seem to make any sense. So the solution, obviously, is to release the police body cam footage from last Friday. That's often done immediately in cases like this, cases that attract heavy public scrutiny. Transparency restores the public's faith in the system. It is the only thing that does. In fact, that's the whole point of body cams, to reassure people that they can really know what happened. Transparency is the antidote to, quote, misinformation. On the other hand, if you want people to fall headfirst into crazed conspiracy theories, then you would keep lying and hiding things. And yet, for some reason, the San Francisco Police Department is refusing to release Friday's body cam video. We learned that today when we filed a records request. No chance, they said. So until we see that tape, there is a lot that we cannot know. But the main question tonight, the one that's going to affect your life going forward, because this story will affect your life, the question is, who exactly is David DePappy? Many in the media seem studiously uninterested. They don't really want to know. At a police press conference last week, a reporter was caught on a hot mic being instructed by someone not to discuss DePappy in any great detail. So it was left in the end to a journalist who doesn't work for a big media outlet, independent reporter Michael Schellenberger, to fill in some of the blanks. Schellenberger first did the obvious. He went to where DePappy was living, across the bay in Berkeley. You're seeing an image of it on your screen right now. Apparently, DePappy was camping full-time in a dilapidated Ken Kesey-style school bus, complete with a gay pride flag out front and a sign that reads, Berkeley stands against hate. Behind the bus hangs a BLM banner. So politically, this picture could not be clearer. You know where this guy stands. But Schellenberger and others kept digging. They found that DePappy was in fact well known in the area, in the entire Bay Area, as a hallucinogenic drug enthusiast and a semi-professional nudist. He often appeared at nudist-themed events. Does David DePappy have a prior criminal history? That's an obvious question, and perhaps a relevant one. But we can't answer it because, once again, authorities in San Francisco have refused to tell us or anyone else. We do know that the people around David DePappy believe that he was completely deranged. The ones who knew him best thought that. The San Francisco Chronicle interviewed his ex-girlfriend, who reported that DePappy is mentally ill and struggles with drugs. For example, he once thought he was, quote, Jesus for a year. He has never been able to hold a job, said the former girlfriend. He has been homeless. This person really does suffer from mental illness, and that is probably why he was there at 2 a.m. She described him as a, quote, broken child in an adult body with serious mental problems. DePappy's neighbors, who would know, said more or less the same thing. So just another homeless, mentally ill drug addict with the fondness for BLM. That's not quite so unusual in San Francisco. Oh, and there's one other highly unsurprising thing about David DePappy. He's also an illegal alien. Today, Fox's Bill Malugin learned that DePappy, who is originally from Canada, has long overstayed his visa, so he is currently in this country illegally. So to restate, the perpetrator in this violent crime against Paul Pelosi is a mentally ill, drug-addicted, illegal alien nudist who takes hallucinogens and lives in a hippie school bus in Berkeley with a BLM banner and a pride flag out front. So take those uncontested facts and let them rattle around your brain for a moment until a recognizable pattern emerges. What does this sound like to you? If you guessed, this is obviously a textbook case of homegrown right-wing extremism, well then obviously you've been watching a lot of cable news today. Here's a selection.
Is this political violence, in your opinion?
It seems to be clear that the content of his social media and the statements he allegedly made about where's Nancy, we're going to wait for Nancy, certainly points in that direction.
It seems like there's this effort to normalize this kind of behavior and to make Trumpers feel, at home and prioritize their feelings.
This is about election denialism. What has happened over the last 2 years has seeped into the minds and the thoughts of some unstable people.
Deranged right-wing fanatics, Trump media allies, and some of the most powerful people in the world were feverishly trying to stir up conspiracy theories that distracted from the central political headline of this story. That years of Republican propaganda and Trump-fueled fascism led 42-year-old David DePape to break into Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco home.
Well, to be fair, the fact that Mika Brzezinski has a high-paying job does give rise to conspiracy theories. I mean, in a fair society, how could that happen? But it has. But the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, the mentally ill, homeless, illegal alien drug addict who lives in a painted school bus in Berkeley with a BLM flag is actually, despite all appearances, another member of Donald Trump's QAnon army. As CNN commentator David Axelrod put it, far-right conspiracy theories are to blame here. And, of course, Jen Rubin at the Washington Post accused right-wing Republicans of inciting violence against the Pelosi family using this illegal alien homeless guy on drugs. The far right demonized Pelosi, and that led to the attack, read a banner on MSNBC. So on what grounds, other than political desperation, are they saying things like this? Well, according to some reports, the homeless, mentally ill, drug-addicted, illegal alien David DePape somehow maintained websites with right-wing content on them. One of these sites was apparently called friendlyfriends.com. And the strange thing about that website is that the web address for it was registered back in September, but there's content on the site that is backdated to August. And Internet Archiving Services didn't register any content from that blog, apparently David DePape's blog, until October 28th. That was the day of DePape's attack on Paul Pelosi. On October 28th, friendlyfriends.com suddenly included a bunch of incoherent posts about UFOs and Peter Navarro. I'm not making that up. Those are the facts. What do they mean? Well, it's a right-wing conspiracy, obviously. Better indict Marjorie Taylor Greene for the crime. So keep in mind, as you shake your head in bewilderment at all of this, that the midterm elections are next Tuesday, and Democrats are in trouble, and they believe the attack on Paul Pelosi might help them. As Margaret Brennan explained over on CBS, because a mentally ill illegal alien attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband, it is now immoral to criticize the leader of Democrats a week before an election. Savor this.
Republican candidates have spent more than $116 million on ads that mention Speaker Pelosi by name in this cycle. If this is about the issues, why don't you make it about the issue? We are 8 days out. Don't you think this needs to change? Why not pull some of these out?
Why do you make it about the issues? Said the lady who spent 4 years screaming about Donald Trump, the man. It's hilarious and brazen and shameless, and the second the midterms are over, they'll stop. But the point is, as always, all the journalists got the same memo, and they're all running with the same memo, of course, using exactly the same words. Ashley Parker at the Washington Post wrote this, quote, in 2022, the GOP spent $40 million vilifying Pelosi in ads, and on Friday, her husband was attacked by a hammer. Do you see the direct correlation? If you criticize Nancy Pelosi, obviously you're endangering her family. Of course, she does run the political party that's facing re-election right now, that controls the United States Congress. She's third in line for the presidency, but you can't criticize her, because if you do, you're just like your acolyte, Paul DePape. So the Republican Party clearly needs to stop running advertisements that hurt Democrats ahead of the midterms. Please. That's the problem here, not the mentally ill BLM nudist in Berkeley. So what they're really arguing is, in the wake of this attack, which is awful against someone who did not deserve it, and we want to be clear about that. Paul Pelosi really is a nice guy. Hard to believe, but he is. But in the wake of that, they're telling you, unfortunately, you can no longer have free speech. Well, you can't. They're telling you this is an example of stochastic terrorism, which is a completely meaningless phrase that emerged like a virus out of the university to infect our public discourse, or more precisely, to suppress our public discourse. Reuters has reported that, and we're quoting, terrorism and extremism experts believe it could be an example of the growing threat of so-called stochastic terrorism, in which sometimes unstable individuals are inspired to violence by hate speech. Okay. What is hate speech, by the way? All of a sudden, everyone in the media has, sort of without explaining why, agreed that there's this thing called hate speech that's real and probably actionable. They can find $1 billion judgment against you if you commit hate speech. But just to remind everyone watching, there's no such thing as hate speech. Hate speech is speech people hate, usually the people in power. The truth is, all speech, except speech that encourages people to imminent illegal action, like go shoot that guy. Short of that, there's no hate speech. All of it's allowed under the United States Constitution, which is our final hope. But what they're telling you is that dissenting in any way from the editorial positions of, say, the Washington Post or the Daily Beast or the Atlantic Magazine, disagreeing with those publications and the consensus they represent isn't simply immoral. No, it's worse than that. It's violence. It gets people killed. That's the stochastic terrorism. When you question, say, COVID protocols or drag queen story hour or the war against Russia, you are effectively smashing an 82-year-old man in the head with a hammer. They're making that argument. And of course, they have no choice but to make that argument. Democrats are very worried about the coming elections, but they're absolutely terrified that Elon Musk may allow people to criticize them on Twitter. And they know what Republicans don't seem to know, which is without censorship, the Democratic Party cannot continue to hold power. Democrats understand that. They have nothing to offer. They have to stop you from asking questions. So they have to crush Elon Musk. Not because he's a right-winger, but because he will allow their opponents to speak. And of course, they are using the attack on poor Paul Pelosi to do just that. The New York Times has just come out with a piece that says, and we're quoting, Elon Musk in a tweet shares a link from a site known to publish fake news. Really? What did Elon Musk do? Well, he linked to an article about how Paul Pelosi called the guy in his home a friend. Well, that's what the 911 tape says. You can draw your own conclusions or not, or maybe you don't care, which is also fine. How is that fake? It seems to be real. NBC News' Ben Collins explained that Musk's tweets are, quote, how you lose a democracy in the age of the internet. Oh, by asking questions. Jimmy Kimmel attacked Musk personally. Used to be a comic. Sad to watch that decline. It's been interesting, Kimmel wrote to Musk, to watch you blossom from the electric car guy into a fully formed piece of human excrement. Then CNN told its viewers today that in the wake of the attack on Paul Pelosi, Elon Musk can no longer let people speak freely on Twitter. That was his plan, but no more. In the wake of the attack on Pelosi, Musk must retain, quote, what the far right calls censorship. Oh, the far right. But you don't need to be far right to identify it as censorship, because censorship is exactly what it is. And to restate, Democrats could no longer exist or hold power without it. They need censorship. And they're going to try to use this horrifying crime to hold on to it. But something else is going on here, too, something beneath even all of that. Obviously, by immediately politicizing the attacks, Democrats get a lot, potentially. But the main thing they do is effectively obscure the deepest truth of all, which is that what happened to Paul Pelosi is not so unusual anymore. Crime in this country is out of control by every measure. Attacks by the mentally ill homeless, even non-nudists who don't live in buses, but the mentally ill homeless are now their own category. They're a feature of life in our cities. In fact, of every part of this country controlled by the Democratic Party. If you live in one of those places, no matter who you vote for, you know that that's true. Get pushed in front of a subway train by one of them. That's entirely real. Here's one recent and especially awful example from California. A 54-year-old man and his 22-year-old daughter were just stabbed to death in the parking lot of a Kohl's in Palmdale by a mentally ill homeless man. Not an unusual story, but a particularly awful one. Here's a local news account.
Residents say there are multiple homeless encampments in the area and that people are known to live out of their cars in the back of this particular parking lot. Everyone said they're shocked by the violence.
For me, I was like dumbfounded, just thinking like, wait, somebody just got stabbed in broad daylight? I mean, like, again, it doesn't matter if it's daylight or nighttime, but the fact that people have the audacity, which means, hey, people don't care, you know, especially when you're dealing with the type of mentalities that these homeless people have, they don't care. So to find out, like, wait a minute, somewhere where I go and shop to get gas and my bank is right here, but then some dead person is right there, that's infuriating and sad.
So to restate, with heartfelt sincerity, we couldn't feel worse about what happened to Paul Pelosi. He didn't deserve it. On the other hand, if you're going to be injured in a violent crime in 2022, not so surprising that that crime was committed by a mentally ill homeless man, because so many crimes are committed by mentally ill homeless people. A fact that everyone who lives in a city understands perfectly well, and the people who are making it possible the leaders of the Democratic Party assiduously ignore. This summer, a nonprofit director in San Francisco, for example, a man called James Spignola, asked 2 homeless men to move away from the steps of a community center. In response, the homeless men violently beat him with a wooden plank and sent him to the hospital. This happened at 11 a.m. in broad daylight. This happens all the time. And here's the point. The psycho, drug-addled zombies who do it are usually released the same day to do it again. Everyone knows that. It's not an accident. It's the result of policies that Nancy Pelosi supports in her own city. But in this case, the guy did not walk because it happened at Nancy Pelosi's house. So the guy is still in jail. He's not benefiting from cashless bail. The police got there in 2 minutes in San Francisco. That's 4 times faster than the average response time in San Francisco. 4 times. So the lesson here couldn't be more obvious, and their screaming is designed to keep you from reaching this conclusion. But here it is. Nancy Pelosi and her party, the Democratic Party, it's not an overstatement to say this, have deliberately created a breakdown in law and order and safety and quality of life in your neighborhood, yet they are given special treatment themselves when it happens to them. So you can grieve the attack on Paul Pelosi and see it as horrifying, because it is, and still understand that the response to it would not be extended to you. It's a double standard. It's a 2-tiered system of justice. That's completely unacceptable, and it's not justice, in fact. It's the opposite. So the media ought to be saying something about this. This is happening, this crime specifically happened, but so many others have happened because of policies designed to allow them to happen. And someone in the press should point that out. Hey, Paul Pelosi's not the only guy who got attacked by a nutcase homeless guy this month. But they're not saying that. And because they're not saying that, Democratic politicians get to skate. And not just skate, but to grandstand on Republican violence in ways that any person with a sense of shame would be totally incapable of doing. Because you'd hate yourself for doing it. But they don't hate themselves. They'll say whatever it takes. On the very same day that Barack Obama blamed Republicans for assaulting Paul Pelosi, Obama was campaigning in Wisconsin for Tony Evers. Does that name sound familiar? That's the governor who let homicidal mobs take over the city of Kenosha 2 years ago for political reasons. Watch this.
We've got politicians who work to stir up division, to try to make... And sometimes it can turn dangerous.
Oh, your speech turns dangerous. Other people are stirring up resentment. Really, no president in American history ever intentionally caused more racial division, more race hate than Barack Obama did. Of course, it was the key to his second term, obviously. But the solution to something that he did is prohibiting you from saying what you think. Shutting down your constitutionally protected right, your God-given right to say what you think is true is always the solution, because they conflate words with violence when it suits them. In Georgia last week, Barack Obama said Democrats, the party that defunded the police, the Democratic Party, somehow, he said, bears no responsibility for the rise in violent crime all over the country. In fact, Obama pretended Democrats had not voted to defund the police at all. Who actually voted against more resources for the police departments? He asked. It's like, if you'll say anything, maybe it works. Yeah. Who oversees Baltimore and Gary, Indiana, and Minneapolis and New York and Seattle and Portland, Oregon? How are those cities doing? Speaking of shamelessness, Kathy Hochul just went on Al Sharpton's show to claim that the crime wave, the one that you're watching, the one that may have hurt you or killed one of your neighbors, it's all fake. In a statement that is crazier than anything Alex Jones has ever thought,
they have this conspiracy going all across America to try and convince people that in democratic states they're not as safe. Well, guess what? They're also not only election deniers, they're data deniers. The data shows that shootings and murders are down in our state by 15%, even in New York City, down 20% on Long Island, where Lee Zeldin comes from.
So that's just a lie, actually. New York is so dangerous that people are leaving. Rents haven't gone down because foreign investors are buying up a lot of the buildings, but people are leaving New York in droves, of course. But according to Kathy Hochul, in a claim that is truly crazier than anything Alex Jones has ever even thought, in the shower to himself, Kathy Hochul is telling you that the data are fake. So here you have a city in which, New York City, subway ridership has dropped by 40% over the last 2 years. Now, according to Kathy Hochul, it's not because subway riders are being pushed in front of trains, people are being attacked by mentally ill homeless. No, it's because apparently millions of New Yorkers are watching Fox News and they've been fooled by right-wing propaganda into thinking the subway is dangerous. That's what she's suggesting. This is too stupid. This is a lie. Voters know it's a lie. And when Democrats get crushed in next week's midterms, it'll be in part because people who live in cities and states run by liberals understand that what happened to Paul Pelosi could very well happen to them. And no one would care. Morning Joe would pretend it never happened. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security established its own Ministry of Truth. It was so ridiculous it had to be disbanded almost immediately. The woman running it was so far out, she was a parody and discredited the censorship movement. But that doesn't mean DHS has stopped trying to censor you. Oh, they are. You just didn't know about it. Thanks to The Intercept, which just obtained many years of internal documents from DHS, we know that companies like Facebook and Twitter have been working closely with the Biden administration to, quote, curb speech that the administration doesn't approve of. Emails also show that Twitter's top censor, Vijay Gadde, who was just fired by Elon Musk, met every month with the Biden administration censors at DHS to talk about new ways to get you to shut up in unconstitutional fashion. Lee Fang broke this story. He's an investigative journalist at The Intercept. He joins us tonight. Lee, thanks so much for coming on. This seems like a really important story, which is for some reason being ignored. Do we get the outlines right?
Thanks for having me.
The administration is working with the tech companies to censor people.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Tucker, we looked at really hundreds of documents that paint a vivid picture of the FBI, the DHS, closely collaborating with the top social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook, to censor various forms of content under the banner of fighting disinformation. And the story shows a couple of things. One, it shows what you just mentioned, a very cozy relationship between the government and these tech giants. There's those monthly meetings that you just mentioned, but also just very cozy emails and texts. Not a very adversarial relationship. You know, we looked at one text where Microsoft executive texts Jen Easterly, the top disinfo director at DHS appointed by Biden, basically saying the private sector needs to get more comfortable with the government. They're closely collaborating on reports talking about the expanded role for DHS in censoring a really broad collection of topic areas, of policy and political topics. And, you know, just broadly speaking, the story also just looks at the mission creep of DHS. This is an agency that was founded in the aftermath of 9/11 to combat foreign terror threats of Al-Qaeda and the like. But over the last 5 years, it's kind of evolved in its mission. It's moved towards fighting disinfo, and their justification is, you know, disinformation radicalizes the homeland. It can lead to disruptions in public health or in political violence. So they have a justification. We have these documents, and they're pushing forward with this broad censorship agenda.
Criticizing the people in charge is dangerous. You know, I don't know why you did this story at the Intercept. I'm just so grateful that you did. It's a great story. It's a huge public service. I hope you're rewarded for it. I doubt you will be, but you should be. Lee Fang, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So most Republican voters believe that if Liz Cheney attacks you, you're probably someone they want to vote for. And so by that standard, Carrie Lake just got maybe the most important endorsement she could ever get. She's despised by Liz Cheney. She joins us next. Liz Cheney is so loathsome on every level that even with her last name, voters in Wyoming rejected her in the Republican primary recently, so she's out, but she's got a couple more months in Congress, and she's spending her time not helping the state she supposedly represents, but attacking Carrie Lake in Arizona. So Cheney is so obsessed with Carrie Lake that she cut an ad against her. Watch this. I've never voted for a Democrat. Well, of course, Liz Cheney is a left-wing Democrat. Let's stop lying. So in response to that ad, Carrie Lake wrote this letter to Liz Cheney. It begins, quote, "Dear Liz, thank you for your generous in-kind contribution to my campaign. Your recent TV ad urging Arizonans not to vote for me is doing just the opposite. Our campaign donations are skyrocketing, and our website nearly crashed from the traffic." Carrie Lake is running for governor of Arizona. As noted, she joins us tonight. Carrie Lake, thanks so much for coming on. Is that true?
That's true. Liz Cheney now is officially my biggest fundraiser to date. We've raised $500,000 since she did the anti-endorsement, and people are still flocking to our website, kerrylake.com, and donating. It's been an incredible boom for us in fundraising. So I got to extend a big thank you to Liz. And at this rate, Tucker, we might have to invite her to our inaugural ball because we're going to have to thank her for bringing in so much fundraising money for us.
Well, but you'd think it's a little weird since she is a congresswoman still from Wyoming. She's got a lot of hobbies. She could be planning a new invasion of Somalia or something, but she's attacking you. She's very focused on you. Why? Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think the same reason I'm being attacked by the media. I'm speaking the truth. I mean, you talked about it in your monologue tonight. We can't talk about all these issues because the media has told us they're prohibited. You know, you can't talk about vaccines. You can't talk about elections. You can't talk about Paul Pelosi, exactly. And now you can't talk about Nancy Pelosi, and you can't talk about the elections, and you can't talk about COVID, and I'm talking about all those things because I still believe we have a little bit of the First Amendment left, but I'm dangerous to people like Liz Cheney and the folks that she hangs out with, and they want to stop people like me.
Words are powerful. I will say the left, Liz Cheney, for example, they understand that. So I want to ask your reaction to this story. So recently the headquarters for Katie Hobbs, that's the person you're running against in the governor's race, will not debate you, was vandalized. The suspect broke in and stole a few things. The suspect's name is Daniel Mota dos Reyes, and reportedly he's an illegal immigrant to this country. What's your reaction to that story?
He's currently in this country illegally, and I had heard that as well. But, you know, you can't say that now because you can't talk about that. It's insensitive. And the press won't report that. And I'm glad that you just said that because that's right. He is currently in this country illegally, just like it sounds like we've had many other instances where people are here illegally and the reporters never even ask that, because it proves the point that having a wide open border means more crime, higher incidence of crime for American citizens. And that's what we're seeing here in Arizona. And you talked about the homeless man that was found, half naked in Pelosi's home. This is why Republicans have ideas to stop these problems. I have a homeless policy. The press doesn't want to talk about that. I have a policy to work to end chronic street homelessness, get people help, get them off the streets, and return quality of life for the hardworking people of Arizona. But the press would rather act like there's been some Watergate break-in at my opponent's office. I don't even know where her office is, by the way. I assumed it was in a basement somewhere. They'd rather cover that and make up lies than cover our policies, which will actually help the people of Arizona and make them safer. The press has gone bad, and the people are awake to it.
The fact that even run someone as lame as Katie Hobbs for governor of a major state tells you that they believe they have the system wired. They think they can't lose. I mean, why wouldn't they pick someone who can talk?
Well, her twin sister, actually, there was some undercover video of her the other day saying that she voted for me. And I was listening to her in that undercover video, and she could actually communicate a little better. And I thought, well, she's obviously smarter if she voted for me, and she can obviously articulate some points. Why didn't they run her twin sister instead of Katie, who can't seem to articulate even her policies before the people of Arizona in a debate?
Damn, it's almost sad. Kari Lake joining us tonight. Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So corporate media outlets are awful, obviously, but the good news is people know they're awful, so they are collapsing. Their business models don't work anymore. And it's not just true in the United States. It's true even in El Salvador, where the media have tried and failed to destroy the single most popular president in the world, Nayib Bukele, who runs El Salvador. He joins us next. Nayib Bukele is the president of El Salvador. He is the most popular elected leader in the world, as measured by American polling companies. Why is that? Why do the media hate him anyway? We recently sat down with him for an episode of Tucker Carlson today. He told us that the entire world's economic system is trying to destroy the values that are the most important to human beings. Here's part of it.
You know, they say the Federal Reserve is nothing federal and has no reserves, right? So they do print more money and they rob you from your wealth and from your savings, and that's immoral. But it's not only immoral, but it also destroys some basic economic principles, like, for example, saving, or your pension. From these financial publications, they will print lies. But you know, there's something special about lies is that they don't last for long. They don't last long. So when people realize that these things don't make any sense, or they see from themselves the difference, like you, for example, you have gone 3 times to El Salvador in different in different times, and so they see things into a different light, and they see reality. So you know, reality always imposes itself over lies, just because it's real. So it's easier to uphold it, or it's easier to show it or to demonstrate it's true. So we're taking some heat, but if you look a little back, they didn't care about us before. So right now, yes, we do have bad publications in Forbes and Financial Times, but they weren't writing about El Salvador before. It's not like we lose anything. So, and there's other publications writing interesting stories about El Salvador. Some guy just, this is a joke, of course, it's not, but he just said El Salvador has the most documentaries per capita. Because there's a lot of people doing documentaries about Bitcoin adoption, about surf, because we have a lot of great surfing in El Salvador. So they have a lot of security measures we're implementing against MS-13. So we're getting a lot of good press, and we're getting bad press too. But the guys printing the bad press didn't write anything about El Salvador before, so it's not that we're losing their audiences, and also their audiences are diminishing.
Right.
Because they're not even. It's not even close. They're not as important as they used to be. They're actually almost irrelevant, but they have their legacy names. But who buys a Time magazine anymore? And I don't know anybody. But you know, before it was a very important thing in a kiosk to buy, you know, a Newsweek or a Time magazine. But now who buys a magazine anymore? Who subscribes to a magazine online? Nobody. I mean, it's just really names. Legacy names and their Twitter accounts. So it's not really, you know, they're not really mainstream media anymore. They're just accounts in social media with a legacy name of being mainstream media.
And you don't seem to care what they say.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, I have learned not to care. But of course, at the beginning, I do care. I did care because for me, I thought they were important. Now that I see they aren't. And since they are not treating us that well, I've learned not to care. And I think it's better because this, and if you look at the ratings, for example, and the amount of subscribers they have, it's really ridiculous. I mean, nobody's watching them. Really, nobody watches CNN anymore. It's like, we were talking yesterday about, in El Salvador, we have this news show, of course, news shows, of course, local. And the news, like the news show, and
it's like nightly news.
Yeah, the nightly news, the main nightly news, local nightly news.
Channel 4. Yeah,
Channel 4. They have like 1 million viewers every night. Out of 7 million people that live in El Salvador, we have 1 million viewers, which is not much. 14% of the population is watching. And then CNN, in prime time, they have like 500,000 viewers. So Channel 4 back in El Salvador has twice the ratings of CNN in the whole United States with 300 million people. So, I mean,
who cares?
It doesn't make any sense for them to be airing their shows anymore.